So because Swallowtail takes place on an island, kind of a more of a secluded island with small town folks that have been there for a long time. I wanted to ask you a little bit about why you decided to do the setting on an island like that. I wanted to ask you if you have any experience living on an island. I myself am from, I grew up on an island in the San Juans in Washington State. And I think that although mine was a Navy-based town, so we did have plenty of people, there are plenty of islands around us where we had to take a ferry to, which is something that you have to do to get to Swallowtail, and places that were kind of untouched by the rest of society. There were no McDonald's on the islands, just kind of smaller town, like one restaurant, a country store. What made you decide to set this on a secluded island like that?
All right. Yeah, that's great. I've always been fascinated by islands and island life, and I was fortunate to be able to live. We lived on Nantucket for a couple of years back in the early 90s, and so that had a big impact on me. And in terms of kind of starting to formulate this idea of this island setting that I wanted to write about, and but there were other islands growing up as well that were always kind of there. I did a lot of sailing in the Great Lakes when I was a kid, young man anyway. And there's a very kind of famous island that's mentioned in the book that's called Put-in-Bay. And, we spent a lot of time there, and it's just an interesting place. And the idea of like the isolation, and like you talk about that idea of like having to take a boat to get there. And, in the winter, it becomes even more isolated. I mean, even on Nantucket, there were times when the ferry couldn't run because of ice and storms in Long Island Sound, in Nantucket Sound. And so that was always kind of a thing that I really liked. And I think that, I'm far from the first writer to use that isolated island setting idea. I mean, I think it's kind of a classic thing. You think about like Agatha Christie, and writers like that. I mean, there's lots of stories set on islands. And so I think that, like between Nantucket and Put-in-Bay, and then a few years ago, my wife and I spent like a whole month one summer on this island up in the Thousand Islands region in New York, which is up on the St. Lawrence River. And we were on an island there where there were, it's a pretty good sized island, but there's only like 15 or 20 houses on the island. There's no cars, and there's not even like a regular ferry that runs. I mean, we had to rent a boat that we would use to get back and forth. And it was like, that was probably the kind of the real trigger for me when saying like, I really need to write a book, that's set on an island, because I love them and I love the idea. So it was just kind of natural. And then, it was really a lot of fun to kind of create my own island, because I knew that I was going to have to do that. I mean, I knew none of them would fit exactly what I wanted for the story. And, so then I got to do a little bit of, the world building, in a sense of creating an island, and the quirks of the island, the people and the history of the island. All of that is completely, made up. So that was a fun part of it, the research and kind of creating that. So now, just to kind of go back for you, like when you were talking about, like growing up on an island and, having that kind of experience there, I mean, did you find that like the people who, the people who lived on islands, was there like a different thing to them? Was there kind of like a mindset that was, kind of a hardier stock that, we're living on an island?
Definitely. I think where I'm from, it is a Navy-based town, but there are a lot of people that go there to retire. And so as a child growing up there, I was bored out of my mind. But I can see now as an adult where it would be a nice place to maybe retire. Um, it definitely changes your idea of what you do for fun versus, because then
Mhm.
after I moved from there, I went to New York. So I'm also familiar with that side of things.
Right.
And so kind of like your main character, Lark, and them, like their ideas with, spending time with horses and being in the outdoors, and a lot of people there boating.
Mhm.
Just your idea of what you do in your spare time, and life is at a slower pace, I think there.
Mhm.
And it's something I noticed when I moved from there to New York. Is in New York, you don't talk to strangers. Like, you don't really just pass people on the street and say hi, hi, hi. And that's something that you did do, um, living where I grew up. And I think that even more so in Swallowtail, you've got less people living there. So everybody knows each other, and everybody knows each other's
Okay.
stories. And
Yeah.
so I do think that that is something that is pretty typical of island life.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's also like the kind of the small town, that, I mean, I think it just there's a correlation there. It's an island, and in most cases it's a small town too, and unless
Mhm.
you're talking about Manhattan or something,
Yeah.
but yeah, but most islands are kind of there's a small community there too. So it is, you're dealing with small town life as a
Yeah.
kid, which is very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we had talked a little bit about names. Both of us have kind of unique names in both of our books. My main character, Frankie, is named after a very famous international con artist. And yours, we chatted a little bit about where you kind of came up with the name. Your main character's name is Lark, but her last name is also Heron,
Finch.
Finch. So
Yes.
lots of bird imagery, and how a great name can add to a story. Do you want to talk a little bit about what made you choose to name your main characters that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lark was a name that had kind of come. I think that Lark and her sister Pip, both have more complicated names. Those are kind of the shortened versions of them. But the Lark and Pip really both kind of came from Great Expectations, one of my favorite books. There's a connection there in there, but that was really just kind of superficial in a sense. Whereas I really wanted this kind of, I had always envisioned Lark as being kind of really tall for her age, and, kind of bird-like in a sense, like kind of long limbs, and, and I wanted this idea. And this is kind of a Connecticut connection here as well, too, is that the, at the near where the Connecticut River, basically about where Connecticut River and where the I-95 bridge crosses it, there's an island there. And in the evenings in the summer and in the fall, that's where these swallows, there's these, they call them the murmurations, where there's like the tens of thousands of swallows, and they go, they circle, and then they kind of go down into the reeds right at sundown. And so that was another thing, is I loved that idea. There's kind of this imagery of the birds that was always in the story. And I was like, all right, sometimes, I wanted them to really have this idea of, being connected to the birds, and that their mom had been an ornithologist, and, but that she came by it kind of in a way too, that her name was Kate Heron, and that she married someone named Mark Finch. And so, and it was kind of like it was fate in a sense that they said, well, if a heron meets a finch, then we're gonna name the kids, Lark and Sandpiper, and really like we're going all in on the bird thing as a family. And so that was like part of the family allure in a sense.